Hello folks! So, we're going to carry on with another episode in the WeakAuras series. And in this episode, we're going to look at a WeakAura that has 4 different triggers, all working at once. And we're also going to look at animations, actions, and sounds, and combine it all looking at groups for WeakAuras and how they can control the settings. So, let's crack on with it. I am going to assume that you've seen the previous video, so you know all the basics, and I'm not going to have to go through those again. Make sure that you've seen the previous video, the one entitled Basics, to make sure you know what I'm going to go through here, or you're quite likely to get lost along the way. So, I am on my Shadow Priest. I would like to make a WeakAura that helps me track my dots. Shadow Priests have 2 different dots, Shadowed Pain and Vampiric Touch. I want something that tells me when I need to apply my dots to make sure that I don't forget to keep them up on the target, and I also want something that gives me a little bit of a warning when my dots are about to fall off so that I can kind of preempt that and make sure that my dots are up all the time and I don't lose any DPS. But rather than have those in multiple WeakAuras all kind of working in tandem, we're going to put it all in one and use a multiple trigger WeakAura. So, to start with, we're going to start with a new text WeakAura. The reason for that is I like to have loud text shouting at me rather than just an icon all the time. Just for the sake of this, we're going to call it Dots Test, just to make our life a bit easier rather than trying to find a name that's not taken. In display text, with a text WeakAura, you can have many different things. Progress, total, name, icon, stacks. This will all work exactly the same as it works on an icon. So when you had the icon before, and it had the little number 2 for how many stacks there are, you can do this now if you were to type %s, then rather than coming up with a number on an icon, like in the previous episode, this will now just come up with the number 2, which is nice and easy. In this case, I want this to actually tell me what to do so that I don't forget, so we're going to tell this to say, apply dots. Type it in just as it is, nothing fancy, hit accept. It's come up here, and we can drag this around just as we could any old icon WeakAura. The rest of this display tab is pretty much exactly the same as an icon, except now we pick font size and font color. So I like font 17, it matches most with my WeakAuras. I will set my X offsets and my Y offsets. There we go, sits nicely in the middle of my screen and will hopefully sit nicely alongside the others. Just while we're here, the other thing I did there, you have this little view button here. This toggles whether the display is visible when you're previewing WeakAuras. The top, you'll see this is kind of half closed, and as are these. This means that if I was to click off this, they'll go away, but if I was to open this fully, I can click off this and they'll stay. So you can use this to toggle whether you view WeakAuras within groups or on their own, and it allows you to arrange your WeakAuras in a way without having to do it individually and remember all of your numbers. So back to the one that we're currently working on. Let's hide those away for now. We're going to look at triggers. The trigger is going to work similarly to before, but this time we're dealing with auras because we're looking at debuffs. So let's start off with Shadowed Pain. Aura name, it works pretty similarly to how it worked when we were dealing with cooldowns and the spell name for the cooldown, but this time I'm going to put in the aura name. The unit, who are we interested in? We can do this on our focus target or on group members or our pets, but obviously for this we're interested in the person that we're currently targeting. Shadowed Pain is a debuff, so it's important that you set that, otherwise the WeakAura will only be looking at buffs, and you'll be very confused as to why it's constantly telling you to apply your auras. Really important one here is own only. If I have another Shadow Priest in the group, and he has his dots up, this WeakAura will notice his dots and not care. It will treat them as mine, and it won't tell me to apply my dots, even though I'm doing no DPS. So you want to make sure that's ticked, so that it is only looking at auras casted or used by you. Same as in cooldowns, when we had it so it shows always, it shows only on cooldown, or it shows only off cooldown. Here we have shows always, shows only when buffed or debuffed, or shows only when not buffed or debuffed. For this one, I'm interested when my dots aren't on the target, so we're going to click missing. You can pretty much ignore this, you always want this to be unticked as is. Now, if we go into load, same as before, we're not going to do anything fancy, just load and Shadow Priest, and that's it. This WeakAura will now appear and tell me when my Shadowed Pain is not on the target, so long as I'm in combat. Nice and simple. I could now, if I wanted, make a very, very similar weak aura 3 other times, and have it for everything else in every other situation, but if you click this button here, we can create a second trigger. We're going to make this exactly the same as before, with the Shadow Word Pain one, but this time we're dealing with Vampiric Touch. So again, it's on target, it's a debuff, it's my own only, and we only care if it's missing. The Required for Activation tab is an important one to note depending on what kind of weak aura you're making. In this case, I care about any of these triggers. If I've got only one debuff on the target that's running, only one of my dots, that's a problem. I need to make sure that I have both up. So in this case, I want any trigger. Any trigger that is on will activate this weak aura. You can do this with all triggers, like before, and that's quite useful if you only want to show up, let's say, when you have 2 buffs running. So you have Bloodlust and your Trinket at the same time. Then you can have something that pops up and tells you, hey, now's a good time to do some DPS. But for now, we're going with any triggers. So now that we've made this any, and we've made one for Vampiric Touch and one for Shadow Word Pain, this will now appear whenever either of my dots is missing. But as I said at the start, if I wait until my dots have fallen off and this pops up, I'm going to lose DPS in the meantime. So I want something else that says, hey, your dots are about to fall off. Reapply them now, make sure that they don't fall off in time. So why not keep it in the same weak aura? Let's add another one, and we'll go trigger 3. Very similarly to before, we're going to add in Shadow Word Pain. It'll find it nice and easily. And we go target, debuff, own only. Now for the differences. You only want this to show when the debuff is there, because this trigger, sorry for the Facebook noise, that was Karis' fault. This trigger is dealing with when the buffs are about to fall off. So you want this to be only when they're debuffed, and importantly, remaining time. You can set this to whatever you like, however you feel. You can play around with it. If you're the kind of person who has slow reactions, maybe you want to go for a 4 or 5 second window. Give yourself a bit of time. Personally, I like to go for less than or equal to 2.5. It's the right setting for me, it's enough warning for me to make sure that I can fit my debuff reapplication in time. Now that we've done that, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but this time we're going to do it for Vampiric Touch. Keyboard noises, yes. So again, target, debuff, own only, buffed or debuffed, remaining time 2.5. So now we have any trigger here. Any one of these will cause this weak aura to appear. In trigger 1, we have Shadow Word Pain is missing. In trigger 2, we have Vampiric Touch is missing. In trigger 3, we have Shadow Word Pain is there, but about to fall off. And in trigger 4, we have Vampiric Touch is there, but about to fall off. If any of those situations is true, this will appear, and that's great. If we head on over to the lovely Void Dummies in the Priest Order Hall, then here we go. If I get into combat with this guy, I now have this thing here saying Apply Dots. You'll see there's plenty of dots on there, Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch, from all these other Shadow Priests practicing their rotation. But because they're not mine, the weak aura is warning me. If I put Shadow Word Pain on there, it doesn't matter. I'm still missing Vamp Touch. Put Vamp Touch on there, now it'll go away. I will spare you waiting 18 seconds. Trust me, when they get below 2.5, it will reappear again. If I change targets, it will appear, because I'm missing my dots on this target, but if I swap back, nice and simple. It tracks. Ah, here we are. It's gone. So, that works completely fine. There's no troubles there. But, as before, I like to make things a bit shiny. If we head into here, actions. This allows you to put in actions, surprisingly enough, whether it be on initiation, which I would recommend ignoring because you can only do this with custom coding, on when the weak aura shows. This isn't just the first time, it's any time any of those triggers are activated, and on hide, so at any time all of those triggers are no longer activated. You can have it so that it glows. This doesn't often work with text, but it can be great if you're dealing with icons. You can have it do a chat message in any channel that you like. So, a perfect example, let's say you have a tracker for battle reses, and you want it to happen so that when your battle res comes off cooldown and it's now available, you announce this to the raid. You would make a weak aura that tracks the cooldown of your battle res, is only there when battle res is off cooldown, and then you could put an action in on show, chat message, in raid, and put something simple like battle res available. That way, when you're in a raid, whenever you can battle res, you automatically say it. There's no need for you to go hunting down for it, it's already there. There's loads of situations in which chat messages can be really helpful. Let's say you want one for your interrupts. You would set a weak aura that only shows when your interrupt is on cooldown, and then if you make an action on show, as soon as that becomes active, so as soon as you interrupt, you post a chat message. Hey, I've used my interrupt. Someone else take my next spot in the rotation, please. That's how chat messages can work. You will have to set them up, and there are add-ons that will do it for you, especially if you use something such as LVI, that can do it automatically. But because WeakAuras is fab, as I keep saying, you can do it in here. What we're concerned with today is play sound. Sometimes a little icon or a little text box appearing just isn't enough, and you want something in the background that flashes up and goes beep beep, hello, and reminds you. So for that you have a long list of noises, some of which are quite irritating, but some good ones I would recommend are bike horn, cat meow, cow mooing being one of the best. Marvellous. Personally I like bike horn, which is what we'll be using for this one. You can choose which sound channel it goes in. So if you're the kind of person who, when you're out and about just doing world quests, you don't really like sound effects to be running because you'd rather just have your own music on, you can put your WeakAuras sounds to play in the sound effects channel. Then when you lower the WoW sound effects, you'll also be lowering your WeakAuras sound effects too. For me I put it in master because I like to have the noises coming on all the time. Now whenever this happens now, as soon as it shows, it will play the sound bike horn. You can set it to loop and it will keep playing the noise whenever this is currently visible, but I promise you it will quickly become one of the most irritating things in the world, so I would recommend you just don't. Now, lastly for this, we're going to look at animations. You have a start animation, a main, and a finish. Your start and finish animations kind of work how actions do, on show or on hide. So, you can choose a custom one, which, as you can see from this, is absurdly complicated, or a nice and easy preset one. So when this weak aura triggers, when it appears, how do I want it to come in? Sometimes you're happy with it just appearing, but other times you would like it to bounce in, or slide from the bottom, slide from the left. That sounds like a song, but personally I like fade in, and for finish I like fade out. It just makes it a lot smoother, and in all honesty it's completely pointless, but it's pretty, so I like it, because I'm me. Main can be useful though. If you choose a preset animation, you can have it flash, you can have it bounce, you can have it shake, or, for some unknown reason, you can have it do this really large, irritating spiral. This can really help you notice some things. If there's something really, really important that you need to notice, you can set it to do some obnoxious move like this. I like it to be on flash, because it's a little bit extra without being super in my face. So now, we've got this set up to play a sound, and we've got it set up for an animation. So if we head back to the dummies, if I get into combat, there we go, we hear the noise, and you can see that it's flashing now. If I apply my dots, it will fade out, which is completely pointless, but just a little bit nicer. And then if I tab over to this, I'm not in combat anymore, so let's get in combat, there's the noise, wonderful. Now the last thing I want to show in this video, for those of you who have been paying attention and care about symmetry, you'll see that these auras are not at all central, and there's a reason for that. It's because of groups. So groups can be really useful with weak auras if you want to put everything in a nice, neat, tidy place. For me, I do it per spec, so these are my ones for Brewmaster Monk, nicely tidied away, these for Guardian Druid, Marksman Hunt, so on and so forth. Here with my Shadow Priest one, I have all of my Shadow Priest auras in one place. This is really useful because it allows you to override any settings and can help you streamline the process. So if you decide you're going to suddenly make 6 weak auras for a brand new spec, each time you make the aura, you're going to have to go into it, and you're going to have to go load, in combat, player class, player this, and so on. And if you're like me, you're also going to have to go into animations, preset fade in, preset fade out. It can add a lot of time, and oftentimes you can forget, and then sometimes you'll be on a completely different class. Let's say you're on a paladin, and it suddenly comes up going, hey, use a warlock gate. You have to go trawling through your list to find, what setting did I forget to apply? Groups are great for that. You can set groups just by going into New, Group, and putting a name. Nothing fancy about it, nice and simple. With this icon here, you have put this display in a group. You click it and you can drop it in there. For now, we're not going to, because I want to, whoops, I pressed the wrong thing, didn't I? You can click out to get rid of it. I want to show the differences that this can make here. So, if I get rid of these animations, but this group here has them set to preset fade in and preset fade out, I can override those settings. If I drop this in here, although this isn't showing it, because the group is, I can set preset fade in, preset fade out, and it overrides it. It puts that setting to all in this group. So I could have skipped all of the steps for load, for animations, and all those, and just put them all in a group and set the group to do that. Nice way of streamlining the process. But the problem I was mentioning with symmetry, I recently upgraded my monitor, got a larger screen, and this kind of shifted my WeakAuras a little bit. So, because I was lazy, the way to fix this was changing the offsets. If I was to set this back to 0, you can see that my WeakAuras were not at all in a nice place. Because I have so many, I didn't fancy going through each one by one, and made a compromise. I said if I put the entire group offset, then it'll do for now, but I do need to go through and correct some of those. But if I wanted to do that, if for some reason I wanted my WeakAuras to be just a little bit higher so that I can include an extra bar above my unit frames here, then it's nice and easy to just go into the group and change this offset like I'm more on the wrong way or the correct way. And then it changes the group as a whole, and if I take out Void Bolt, for example, it will shift it back to where I told it to. So groups are great for overriding settings and for moving whole sections of WeakAuras all at once. I hope that helped, and I hope covering a slightly more difficult WeakAura will be useful to some people. If there's anything specific you want me to cover, then by all means let me know, or dare I make the old cliche, leave a comment below. Thanks everyone.